Welcome to the DEJ Show. I am your host, David Edgerton Jr., and I'm so glad that you joined me today. This podcast was designed for everybody in mind. If you want to get better at something, if you want to live your life to the fullest, if you just simply want to stay positive, this is the podcast for you. If you like what you hear, make sure you leave us a good review on Apple Podcasts. So if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's do this. Today's episode is based on the fact that I love the game of Texas Hold'em. It is a modified poker game, or a variation of a poker game, I should say, that I absolutely love. You get two cards, and based on the two cards you have and the 3 to 5 cards that are placed on the table, you put a hand together, and that is what you actually play with. So the flop is 3 cards, so you can make a hand out of those 3 and your 2. Then you get the turn card, which is the next card. See if you can get a better hand. Then you get the river card, and that card is the one that between the 5 on the table and the 2 in your hand, you can make a good poker hand from. So all of the betting goes back and forth between those turns of cards, and that's how the game is pretty much played. But I don't really want to get into the game itself. What I want to get into is the principle that the game teaches that I think anybody can use based on playing the game. Here's the first point. You cannot win if you don't get in the game. How can you expect to win at a poker tournament or even a poker game if you don't first pay the cost of admission and play? Life is a lot like that. You cannot play in the game of sports or play in the game of corporate America or play in the game of entrepreneurship unless you first pay the entry fee. You say, well, what's the entry fee? Well, it depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to start a business, for example, you got to pay the entry fee of learning a business or industry that you want to get into before you actually get into it. Some people would argue me down and say, no, you don't have to do that, David. You can just jump in and figure it all out. Okay, you can jump in and figure it all out if you like to. However, I think that the time that you spend trying to jump in and learn it, you could have spent working for somebody else until you got enough knowledge, abilities, and skills to do it on your own. Personal opinion. But you still have to pay the cost of admission before you can play. So that's the first principle. So we pay $40 to play in this tournament, and basically if you lose your $40. If you win several hundred of dollars, depending on how many people show up at a game. So you can't go for the prize without first paying the cost of admission. So that's the first thing. And that's about life, whatever you're trying to accomplish, whatever you're trying to get into. The second principle that I pulled out of playing poker was this: standing still and doing nothing will eventually kill you. So let me explain that for a second. So every time that you have a poker hand, you have to do either what's called a small blind or a large blind. And basically that's a bet that you have to make regardless of what cards show up. So sometimes what a lot of people do, and I've done this too, is you don't even play because you don't have a good set of cards that you're dealt from the beginning. However, sometimes you get that blind or that large blind spot because it rotates around the table. So eventually you're going to have to do it. And you actually have to put money in before you even see what the cards look like. Well, how does that apply to life and business and other things? Well, if you stand still, the cost of standing still, in other words, staying in the same place, having the same mentality, doing the same things all the time, the cost of doing that is going to be what I call the cost of life passing you by. You could decide to get in a game, get into a situation, learn, go with it, and be better, or you could decide to stay exactly where you are. But realize, if you stay exactly where you are, that is going to cost you something, because it's going to take more for you to catch up. It's going to take more for you to take advantages of these opportunities that you may have lost. And by the time that occurs, you may not have what you need to do it. In a tournament, what happens is the blinds go up after a certain amount of time. And what happens is the bet that you have to now make to play a hand gets larger and larger and larger. And when those blinds, small and large, continue to increase and you never play and you never get in the game, eventually you're going to run out of chips and not be able to do anything. You'll be automatically kicked out because you won't have anything to play with. That's the worst place to be. Another great principle that I get from playing the game that works for life and business and other things that we do is this. When you're playing the game, know what hand can beat you. Always know what hand can beat you. Every time I play, I practice and I have to remember that a flush beats a straight. In other words, a hand of 5 cards that are from the same suit beats a hand of cards that may be different suits, but they're in numerical order. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, for example, is a straight. But if they're different suits, great. That's a great hand to have. But a flush, 5 cards of the same suit, say 5 spades, for example, that would win. In life, just like in poker, you must know before you play the game and before you make certain moves and make certain decisions, you must know the downside of what that decision or move could bring to you. Know that as you make the decision. Don't just go out and make decisions or go after certain things just because they look great. Know what the cost is if you go after it and it doesn't work. That is managing your downside. And I've heard people say that a lot, especially in sales, where you have to manage your downside and take advantage of your upside. That is a true statement. It doesn't mean that you can't take risks. In fact, the reason I play poker is to keep me in the mindset of taking risks. You got to do that. But definitely don't take foolish risks that could take you out of the game. Same with life, same with business. Don't take foolish risks that could either take you years to recover from, take your investments away from you. You may lose a lot of money, lose a lot of time, things of that nature. Make sure you manage the downside of everything that you do. And poker helps me with that. So that's one of the principles you can get from that game. Another principle you have to do when you're playing poker, as well as life and business, is you have to mitigate, accept, or transfer those risks. I kind of talk about that a little bit when we talk about knowing what could kill you, but at the same time, or what could beat you. But at the same time, what you got to do is you got to manage those risks. Sometimes you have to see the flop in poker, the 3 cards that you're supposed to arrange with your 2 cards to make a hand, before you even know if you've got a good hand. In order to see the flop, you must ante up. That's where we get that whole ante up term from. You must put in enough money to match the big blind, which is the ante, in order to see those cards. Sometimes paying that money to see the 3 cards does nothing for you, and you end up folding anyway. However, sometimes you may start with 2 cards that are not so strong, but then when you see the next 3 cards, you may get a really good hand. Here's a question. How would you even know if you did not take the risk to see the next set of cards? That is what we mean by managing your risk, mitigating, transferring, or accepting. You must sometimes invest in a risk to see if it will give you some kind of return. But if you don't do any investment, then you will not get any large return. If you have a good hand and you got some strong cards, manage the risk. Play the hand well. Play it as well as you can. Do what you can to win based on what you're looking at. That is what we mean by managing your risk. The last principle I like to share with you in this episode is this. If you don't succeed the first time, keep trying. In other words, if you play in a game and you lose, learn why you lost. Go back and figure out. Look at those hands that you played. Look at the decisions you made. Look at the direction you went in. What did you learn from that would now help you be better? Or if the situation presented itself again, what would you do differently? How would you act differently? Then do it again. Keep going at it. Keep going at it. And eventually you'll get better and you'll develop the skills, knowledge, and abilities you need to succeed. Case in point, I played in a tournament the first time, maybe 2004. I think that's when I learned the game. And then here, maybe about 2 years ago, I played in a tournament and actually won the tournament. Now, I've never won a poker tournament before over so many years of playing, but I won one 2 years ago. The lesson is it may take you that long, almost 12 years for me, but it may take you that long of learning the game, learning how to respond, looking at situations you're in, figuring out what to do, reading people, understanding the mechanics of the game as well as the art of the game. It may take you that long to get to a point where you're an expert. And I'm not saying I'm a poker expert. I'm not that. But it may take you that long to develop a competency that you can now use to take advantage of opportunities that come your way. So definitely don't quit, keep learning, and continue to do well as you apply your new knowledge. So there you go. Those are my principles from playing poker that you can apply to business and life. The first one, you cannot win if you don't get in the game. The second one, standing still and doing nothing will eventually kill you. The third one, always know what hand can beat you. The fourth one, mitigate, accept, or transfer your risks. Definitely do that. And the last one is this. If you don't succeed the first time, keep trying. There you go. Life lessons from a fun game of poker. So, hope you got something out of this episode, and we'll catch up with you next time. That's it for this episode of the DEJ Show. I'm David Edgerton Jr., your host, and thank you so much for spending some time with us today. You can find us on Apple Podcasts. You can find us at www.thedejshow.com, and you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Please log into Apple Podcasts and leave us a review, and we will see you next time. And remember, if anyone asks you to have a great day, you tell them, have a better one. We'll see you next time. Thanks.